I had a different intro. In fact, I was going to use for my intro for this sermon, I was going to actually come up with jokes about men and women. So this week we're looking at differences between the gender. This is like low-hanging fruit for all the comedians. And you can Google like jokes about men and women. And there's a gazillion of them. My parents got me a book in high school or college for Christmas one time. And it's just a joke book. It's got like 6,000 jokes. They're like all lame, right? But of course I kept the book. You know, it's like they thought I was funny. And now I think I'm funny. But now I've got all these jokes. And there's a ton for men and women. The problem is you look at like all these jokes and they get mean like really quickly about like negative stereotypes about men and women. There's not a lot where it's like, haha, funny. It's like, haha, and you're wrong, you know? And so like trying to find a right joke about gender to like lead off, which is like mutually edifying, which is more what I see the Bible doing, there's not a lot of them. But the one that I was going to tell is probably one you've heard. It's like the top Google hit, or one of the close ones, right? I didn't read through all 6,000 jokes, but really only like a couple hundred are about men and women anyway. So there's this guy, right? His husband, he's reading an article and he's sharing with his wife, it says here that, you know, women use 30,000 words and men only use 15,000 words in a day. You know, the wife says, well, of course, you know, we have to repeat everything we say twice for you guys to hear it. And the guy says, what was that? And so that's, get it, you know, because women talk more than men, stereotypes, and we all laugh. Like that's, we know all these different things that we say, and you know, maybe you've heard, you know, men are from Mars and women are from Venus, or the other way around or something, and I heard one comedian talk about how women's minds are like spaghetti and everything's kind of all intermingled and tangled, whereas men have like waffles, where it's like this goes here, and my emotions go here, and my things to do go here, you know, and like we laugh because this is our shared experience, right? I mean, it's very close and common to us, right? But then, like, you know, when Jesus was talking about the old law, he says, you have heard it said, but I tell you, boom, and he interprets it, and he says, well, this is the core, the key. What does he say when it comes to men and women? We have our jokes, we have our stereotypes, this is fun, but what does he say? But I tell you, men are like this, women are like this. What's the truth? That's our main question that's going to guide us on our quest, on our adventure this morning, and we're gonna have some great discussion. Not during the service, but we're gonna uncover passages and texts that are gonna lead to great discussion. Here's where I want to start. I want to start at the very beginning when we look at the creation, right? Well, what hints when God creates male and female does he have within this creation narrative? The beginning, right? When we start seeing what is his design for the world. What we do see, and I won't put this up, you can check me if I'm wrong, Genesis chapter 1, God creates everything, and the pinnacle of his creation is humanity. They're made in God's image. Now, it's not man that's made in God's image. It's both male and female. The Hebrew actually specifies male and female. So it's not one gender and not the other gender. They're both combined. They are both made in Christ's image. They are both co-missioned. They have the exact same mission to rule over the world, and they're given the plants of the world to eat. They're very equal in chapter 1. When you zoom in to Genesis chapter 2, that's the story about man being created at a separate time from woman. So Adam and Eve, that story's in Genesis chapter 2, and that's where we're going to look. But I want to point out, the start of this section is the very first time in all of creation that something is not good. So in Genesis chapter 1, God's creating everything and declaring it to be good. It is good. And then it says as a conclusion after humanity has been created, it's very good. Well, somehow there in that sixth day when he's creating humankind, he has created man, he's not yet created woman. And for the first time in all human history, the Lord God said, it is not good. There's something not quite complete with just having man. Here's what he says. The Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. That helper word, it's going to come back up. We'll read it later. But a lot of debate is around what did he mean by a helper, right? Here's how the process unfolded. Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds in the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. But for Adam, here it is again, no suitable helper was found. Now, most people, there's debate around what does this helper word mean. It's a particular word, ezer, in Hebrew, and people say, oh, helper, I get it. So it's like a servant, right? It's like someone to help the man do whatever thing he's supposed to do. That's incorrect because this word, whenever it's used elsewhere in the Bible, is used as someone that comes to rescue and someone that comes to help in a time of distress. So Israel has talked about looking to Egypt for help, like they're being invaded by Assyria, and they say, I need a helper. But then that suitable helper, that means kind of like your corresponding helper, meaning much more equal. But I don't like playing word games. I don't like using definitions of words or what it means somewhere else. What does the text say, right? Like how does the Bible use the suitable helper? How does God want to describe who the suitable helper is? That's what we can read here. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. The man said, finally, someone to do my laundry and cook. No, he didn't, right. No, he didn't say, now I'll be so much more productive because I have a helper. No. What the Bible wants us to understand about this woman that was created from man is this. This is what Adam said. This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. In the Hebrew language, there's a word play on woman, kind of similar to the English, where it's man is inside the woman, the word woman. So it's like of man, right? Woman. What Adam says when he sees this suitable helper is not, oh, you are now my pet. You are now my servant. You are now less than me. He says, bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. He says, we are equals. In fact, we are made of the exact same thing. What the Genesis text teaches us is that male and female are two sides of the same coin. They complete each other. They're part of a set. It's not one and not the other. There's no debate about who does what, but rather that they're together. And that's exactly how it ends. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. This is read oftentimes at weddings. You know, it's indicative of what marriage looks like, where the two become one. And this is the theme of Genesis chapter 2. There are male and female, but they are meant to be together. They're designed to be together. So I would say when we look at the Genesis creation account, the main point that we see is that men and women are designed to be together. They're the same set. They're two sides of the same coin. You know, they're the same parts of the body, and they don't go, they're never intended to be independent of one another. The only thing that we can see here from this text, if we want to look at distinctions, we can see that women or females, women, maybe at some level has their identity in man. And we see that men at some level is not complete or good without woman. But I would say, as opposed to trying to find distinctions between the two here in this text, we see they are designed to be together. It's not good to be separate. I view myself as a man. There are certain things that I want to do. This is an illustration. Don't worry. I'm not trying to say the Bible has any sort of masculinity or femininity codes. It doesn't even tell you like what you're supposed to be. But there are blogs in our world like The Art of Manliness that tries to teach this is what it means to be a man. And it's always fun to learn because a lot of it are just skills that I don't know how to do. One of them is how to make a fire without like cheating, you know, like with a match or like a lighter. I always cheat when I make fire, but I'm fascinated by creating a fire, you know, like in caveman times, or, you know, all my matches are soaked in water or something. You know, like that never happened to me because I'd never be out in water. I'd be inside in a car or a hotel. But let's say I was. I read an article about how can you start a fire from using flint and steel. And it says, well, you've got to have flint in one hand and you strike it with the steel, and then They even talk about there's a type of char cloth, which is like already burnt cloth that can really help spark and catch the sparks. And then you got to have all the dried grasses or leaves or whatever you're going to use to start it. Then you got to blow on it, make sure it's got oxygen, and then finally maybe you can get a fire. Now we could argue over and over about, is it the steel that strikes, or the iron striking the flint? You know, Flint and Steel. Which one is actually producing the sparks? Is it the flint producing the sparks, or is it the steel producing the sparks? Which one is maybe more necessary, right? Can you switch out flint with a different kind of rock? Can you switch out steel with something else? And we can debate about, well, which one's more important and which one maybe is better than the other. Which one do you start with? Which one do you hold in your right hand versus your left hand? I mean, we can break it down however we want, but the fact of the matter is you need both to start a fire. You know, and so when we look at men and women in the Bible about how God created us, we can argue about what does it mean to be a helper? What does it mean to be made from a rib versus made from another body part? That Adam was made first or that woman was made second. And we can try to understand what does this all mean? But in Genesis, it means they're both needed. They're both necessary. You can't make fire with just steel. You can't make fire with just flint. You need the two together. God designed men and women to be together. That's what we see in the creation account. Now, where does it teach us how we're supposed to act differently? The whole Bible is filled with stories, both with men and women characters, but they more just do things. There's no teaching that says, this is what men should do, this is what women should do. Jesus doesn't mention it, but all the way when you get toward the end, where we get to these epistles, these letters that Paul, James, Peter, early church leaders were writing to the early Christians, then we start seeing some differentiation where they say women are to do this, men are to do this. We looked at one of those passages last week where there's a distinction in worship. And we're going to look at another one today. Most of what we see, the differences between men and women, are not at an ontological level, meaning like who man and woman are at their core, but rather how they're supposed to express their roles within the church and particularly within the home. And we're going to take a look at those right now. The first passage I want us to look at to see maybe if we can understand a little bit further what are these truths, what are these distinctions between men and women, is Titus. Chapter 2, this is, I think, the longest section where there's specific instruction for different genders. He talks, what should the older men do, what should the older women do, what should younger women do, and what should younger men do. We're going to read it all together, but I want you to look at which commands are particular to a gender, right? Like some commands he'll say, and you're like, yeah, but we all should be doing that. But others are particular to either men or to women. Here's where we're at. We're at Titus 2, 1 through 8. You, however, this is a letter from Paul to a pastor, Titus, who's being sent to Crete. Very similar to the letter that we read last week, which was sent to Timothy, who's pastoring a church in Ephesus. It's someone who's going to represent Paul to a church that he's heard some things about, and Titus needs to straighten them up. And we see that here in this opening verse. You, however, must teach what is appropriate to sound doctrine. Teach the older men to be temperate, worthy of respect, self-controlled, and sound in faith, in love, and in endurance. Likewise, teach the older women to be reverent in the way they live, not to be slanderers or addicted to much wine, but to teach what is good. Then they can urge the younger women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled and pure, to be busy at home, to be kind, and to be subject to their husbands, so that no one will malign the word of God. Similarly, encourage the young men to be self-controlled. In everything, set them an example by doing what is good. In your teaching, show integrity, seriousness, and soundness of speech that cannot be condemned, so that those who oppose you may be ashamed because they have nothing bad to say about us. So did you hear what he was commanding or teaching each of these ages and genders to do? A lot was very similar. If you've got it in front of you, you can go look at it. But if you notice, there's a lot of similarity between them. Like you heard self-control multiple times. I think the one group that he said not to be self-control was the older women, which he said don't be addicted to too much wine, which is like, hey, have self-control. It's like a lot of what Paul is saying to Titus to teach is be godly. And then it's just in whatever avenue you have, whatever it looks like. None of us would argue that because he teaches, I hit the wrong button. Because he teaches the young men to be self-controlled. That's a bad example because we just talked about self-control. Oh my goodness, I'm having problems. The older men to be temperate and worthy of respect. That does not mean that none of the other genders or ages need to be temperate or worthy of respect, right? We understand that Paul is saying, this is, be godly, right? Teach them appropriate according to sound doctrine. And then that conclusion at the end, so that if anyone looks at them and accuses them, they'll be shamed, right? Because they have nothing bad to say about us. So that's what this looks like. Now, the two things that are particular to either men or women are older women teach the younger women to be subject to their husbands, right? And then also to be busy at home. Paul tells the Thessalonians, be busy, but this specification of where they're supposed to be busy is in particular to those young women. Okay, now we have a choice to make, right? So Paul is saying that younger women need to be subject to their husbands and busy in the home. The question we have to answer is this descriptive or prescriptive? Here's what I mean by that. If it's descriptive, Paul is saying the general principle here is that we are going to live in a godly way, and describing what the culture is like, it means younger women be subject to your husbands and be busy in the home. That's if he's describing it, which essentially means this is how it is in our culture, therefore we're going to do it like this, but not saying this is how it should be. If it's prescriptive, that means this is how it should be. Like women are supposed to be subject to their men, not because of anything cultural going on, but rather we need to create a culture that is like this. And this is where Christians start disagreeing. Is Paul being descriptive and saying this is just how things are and therefore this is how the application works? Or is it prescriptive? This is the type of culture we need to create according to Scripture. Here, I'll try to give another example from that Flint and Steel. So in reading this blog, there's pictures of someone doing it, and you can watch a video of a man showing you how to create fire from flint and steel. He holds it in his left hand, there's a char cloth on top, and he strikes it, and he tries to catch the sparks on the char cloth. Now, is that prescriptive or descriptive, right? Like, is he saying that is the way that we have to do every time, or is it in that scenario, this is how he did it? So I can read and interpret it in different ways. If I believe that it's descriptive, that means that I'm free to take liberties in how I create this fire by using my left hand, by maybe striking the steel with the flint, having the char cloth on the ground, because I say that's not important to have it exactly right as long as I can make a fire. If I think it's prescriptive, then I say, no, I have to hold it like this, and I'm doing it. Right? Like there's two different ways of interpreting. I think I just muddied the waters. Now I'm like saying this and it's just like, yeah, what are you talking about? The difference is, do we need to create a culture that Paul's describing, or do we have freedom to apply this in our present culture? And this is where Christians have disagreements. There's one other passage I want to get to and really dive into this subject. This is a lighter version, but before we get there, I want to demonstrate that this passage indicates a difference, a distinction between male and female. He's teaching different things to older males, younger males. Women teach other women. It's setting a precedent for saying we can have women's ministries. We can have men's ministries. There are certain life experiences that are shared by individual genders. So we're meant to be together, and yet there's a recognition that there's enough distinction that it's appropriate, at least sometimes, to have ministries that particularly stay along gender lines, all within the context of a local church where everyone's together. But we see that here in Titus, and I think our experience tells us, well, that makes sense. So we're hosting a Mothers of Preschoolers group that another church is running here at our church, because we feel like, well, when you're a mom of a preschooler, that's a different experience from maybe other people. So we want other moms of preschoolers to encourage moms of preschoolers. That's appropriate within a church where the genders are together. That's what we see from this passage. All right, that other one that I was teasing is Ephesians Chapter 5. The reason why I think this one's a little bit of a heavier hitter is because one of the ways we answer this question, is this descriptive or prescriptive, as we try to go and say, well, does God have anything special or significant about one gender over the other, that would kind of transcend culture? In the homework last week, if you looked at it in 1 Corinthians, Paul makes this argument that the man is the head of the woman. And so there's this idea of headship. Perhaps you've heard of it, whether that's authority or source of life, but there's this headship. In 1 Corinthians 11, the only application that Paul makes is whether or not women should wear head coverings. Most of us have decided that that's more descriptive than prescriptive, where Paul's not saying you have to wear a head covering in all areas, but we interpret it as saying he was being descriptive of their culture, applying it that they needed to wear head coverings. Man, this is confusing. I can just see you guys just sitting there like, man, give me another illustration, Brad. This is too much. But we're going to jump into Ephesians chapter 5 because he again, Paul brings up this concept of headship, and he attaches it to the behavior between men and women, distinctions particularly within marriage. And this is one, you probably have heard of it. It's probably a little more infamous than famous for what it says. Here's how it starts. Ephesians 5, 21 through 33, we absolutely have to address this passage if we're talking about what are the distinctions between men and women. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. This is in a whole section of how the church should operate with each other, if you want to read back a little further in Ephesians chapter 5. However, he turns here and talks specifically about the marriage relationship between a wife and a husband. Ephesians 5, 22, wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband, here it is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. A huge question for interpreting this passage. What does it mean to be a head? Right? So some people would say that the head is authority. Just like Christ is the head of the church, which means, the church obeys and does everything that Christ says. We aren't free to create our own theology or say, like, I'd rather do this, but instead we are fully submissive and we have to obey everything that Christ has said. Therefore, they imply, well, I guess if husband's the head of the wife can only do what the husband wants and they have to obey everything that the husband says. That would be one interpretation, and that interpretation will be wrong based on the context. Another interpretation of head is that it could be the source of life. And this is one where people would argue, just as man was the source of life for the woman, thinking back to Eve, right? She was created from man, and Christ is a source of life for the church. Christ established the church, and it's him within it, and the Holy Spirit that fills up the life of the church. Therefore, this headship just only means who's the source of life. Again, I think we're jumping down a rabbit trail we don't have to get to when we try to parse out exactly what this head means. If that's your thing, dig into it. There's a ton of literature every which way about it. Again, what does the text say? How does Paul define what being the head or being the body or the tail, whatever the opposite of the head is? What does Paul say it is? It's very clear, at least from this passage, that it means the wife should submit to their husbands as the head. So if you are not the head, it means you submit. That's what Paul is saying here. And to be honest, that's not revolutionary. That's not the main point that the church in Ephesians heard. In their culture, that's normal. Yeah, of course. Yeah, wives submit to their husbands. That's easy. That's normal. What's not normal, what Paul's really pushing against culture, is what he says next. What does it mean to be the head? Right? This was just the body. What does it mean to be the head according to Paul? Here's what he says. It's not you get to do whatever you want and everyone else follows. He says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church. This is what Christ did for the church and what husbands are supposed to model. Without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. So what Paul's saying is, as the head, if you are the source of life, if you're the authority, whatever you want to call it as the head, it means you have to give yourself up for whoever the not head is. So if it's husbands and wives, husbands, you have to do this to your wives. And he talks about sacrificing, presenting them blameless and pure, right? As if they are the head, right? You're supposed to treat the not head as if they are the head, the ones with honor. And the words Paul uses, this is my favorite part, without stain, wrinkle, or other blemish. Before he said washing with water, he's talking about activities like bathing, spot removal, ironing, doing the laundry. Like he is literally using the analogies of the roles that the wife would have, right? That serves and does the dirty work to make sure that the husband can do their own things. Paul's saying, no. As the head, you do the dirty work. That's what you're called to do. You're supposed to sacrifice yourself. You're supposed to treat them as if they are the more glorious, more authority, the more head, the one that needs to be lifted up. He's calling the husbands, if you're the head, whatever that means, it has to mean that you get on your knees and you do the dirty work for the body, right? And he goes on to that analogy, right? In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. Whoa. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body just as Christ does the church, for we are members of his body. Same analogy. This is looking at that main point we saw from Genesis chapter 2, where men and women are designed to be together, like a head and a body, right? If there's any head detached from a body, that's a Halloween decoration. It's meant to give you a spook, right? Like we walk past a house that's already got Halloween decorations up, and one of the bodies doesn't have a head. And it's supposed to be scary, right? Same way, if there's headship between male and female, they're meant to be together. The one cannot be separate from the other and dragging the other behind it. That's grotesque, and we recognize that. That's what Paul's saying. We're meant to be together. We're designed to be together. And in case you don't think he's already thinking of Genesis chapter 2, he says this at the end. However, each one of you, I did it twice. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Where have we heard that before? Genesis chapter 2. This is in the back of Paul's mind that male and female, men and women are designed to be together. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. We're called to reflect this unity between Christ and the church. And he concludes, however, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. We still have that question, is this prescriptive or descriptive? So we can clearly see whatever this headship means, it includes this radical call to serve and do the dirty work for the other. But is Paul saying that our relationships, particularly within marriage, are meant to be headship, where one has this authority over the other and the other submits? Or is it descriptive, where in that culture that's what it looked like, but in our culture, maybe it can reverse? But whatever we decide, I think there is room, and I'll explain my reasoning later. Whatever we decide, the important point, the timeless point that we always have to translate is this. The leader has responsibility to love subversively. However you want to define it. If you say this leader is always men because they have headship and they were created first, great. You've got extra responsibility, men. If you want to say, well, that's in their culture, but in our culture, we're also going to include women in this as well. We have to say, if anyone has any sort of authority, if anyone has any sort of priority, if anyone has any sort of power, they have an additional responsibility, and that's to do the dirty work for the other and to elevate and lift them up. This is countercultural. That's why I say subversively. What Paul's saying for men to do was not normal. He was not telling them, and husbands, just kind of do your normal role. So like the head, if the man is the head, it would nourish the body, right? It would fill it, and so that the husband would be the provider of the wife, and protect the wife in their culture. But Paul says that's not good enough. Don't just fulfill your role. You are actually supposed to take on their role and lift them up into your role according to what culture says. You're supposed to completely reverse these cultural gender roles. So whatever we decide, if this is normative, right? If Paul's being prescriptive or if he's saying it's descriptive, we have to say, if I have any sort of leadership, if I have any sort of authority, any sort of power, if any sort of expectations the culture is putting on me, I need to rather get on my knees, serve, and lift others up. I think, in particular, this passage is probably more descriptive than prescriptive. Here's why. There's room for debate on this, and it's okay if you think differently. This is in a section where there's different personal relationships where there's a difference in power dynamics. So it talks about wives and husbands. This is after it goes through the church and how we're supposed to be together, how we're supposed to pray together, how we're supposed to worship together. Wives and husbands, then parents and children, and then masters and slaves. And every time there's an expectation not just on those in the lower position to submit to the person who has that authority over them, but also there's a command or expectations on those in power. And I think that in these sections, Paul is applying this timeless principle that Jesus demonstrated when he died on the cross. Philippians Chapter 2, he did not consider equality to be grasped with God, but made himself nothing, taking on the very nature of a servant and submitting himself to death, even death on a cross. That's in Philippians 2 that demonstrates even though Christ had all of the authority in the world, he chose to serve us and to die for us. That's exactly what Paul says, just like Christ loved the church. That's the timeless principle here. But we see the different ways that it applies in their culture. Just over 200 years ago, we decided that masters and slaves portion that comes later in this passage was not prescriptive, but rather descriptive. So for hundreds of years, we'd use that as an excuse that says, see, Paul said that we're supposed to have masters and slaves, because it's right there, it's prescriptive. And then a couple hundred years ago, we decided, you know what? He's not prescribing that. He's describing that. Because in his culture, there were masters and there were slaves. And therefore, he was saying, here's how we live within it. And so for me, I think it's the same thing. We have to look in our culture and see what are these roles and then choose to live the way that our role is called, whether we're the ones in authority and power, in headship, or whether we're the ones that are not. One final thing. When we read this passage in Ephesians, I think we stop at this wives should submit to their husbands should love their wives, and now we start thinking about what that could mean. And we start saying, oh, okay, well, if men are the headship, right, and husbands are the heads, and women should submit, that means men make all the decisions. That means the buck stops with them. They decide on things. That means they get to go wherever they want, and the woman has to support it. The woman has to do whatever the husband tells them. Where are you reading that? Are you reading that in your text? No, you're making that up. What Paul said, like if we're going to follow the Bible, we have to follow the Bible, not just what we want it to say. Now, I'm hard-pressed to find any privilege that the Bible teaches that men have because they have headship. So even if you say, I believe that men have headship from God, the Bible does not say there's any privileges that go along with it, unless you count praying to God with an uncovered head a privilege. But there's nothing here that says, oh, and therefore you get to talk more. Therefore, you get to do more. Therefore, you get to pick the kind of roles and responsibilities that you get to do, and they can be all the good ones. Like, that's nowhere. That's not in the text. That's our misinterpretation and misapplication of what the Bible says. If we say anything, if we conclude anything from this passage, it has to be this. The leader has the responsibility to love subversively. Okay, so how does this apply to us then? I think, one, we have to be aware of where do we have authority? Where do we have privilege? There's a hot button word. Like I'm a white male, right? Like I'm the one that I have to recognize I have certain amounts of authority that others don't have. Whether I want it or not, whether I agree with them or not, if my culture is saying that, this is my role. Or you can't see it back there. I can see all my slides back here. That's why I always point in the back. But this is where you guys are looking. The leader has a responsibility to love subversively. So when I read my text, whether I want to or not, whether I believe I have it, if my culture says you have this additional authority, I say, okay, then I better be getting on my knees and serving and lifting others up. That's what it means. That's me as a pastor, right? I'm the one that you guys are listening to. You're not the ones that I'm listening to. So there's additional responsibility on me to ensure that you guys are lifted up. You have an opportunity to share. You have an opportunity to bless me, that I can do the dirty work somehow, that I take trash out or whatever it is. So I serve you. Like I'm supposed to do this counterculture subversively. The role of the body is simply to submit, to play that role. You know, it's to listen, to support, to respect. That's what it looks like. Goes further than that. So if you're an employee or an employer, right? If you're a manager or if you're just kind of coming in, there's authority, right? There's a differential. And what I would say that Paul is urging us to follow is if you're a manager, it's normal to care about the people that work for you. It's normal for you to give them opportunities for career advancement, to have opportunities to share and to grow and to develop. It's normal to give them all the necessary tools that they need to do their job well. But I think what Paul's saying is go further than that. Like, make them a coffee. Tell them, you know what, take Friday afternoon off. I will do your work for you. I'll stay late and do your work. Or the one task that no one really wants to do that's on their plate, say, you know what, I'm going to plug in that spreadsheet. You don't even worry about it. You take a break. Like, treat them as if they were the one of greater honor. That's what it means to be the one in authority. We could keep going on and on. Parents to children. It's not just loving and providing with them, but spending time and elevating them, like going on dates with each of your individual kids and really getting to know them, listening to all their stories, letting them play games that don't make sense to you and that they're hard, but give them a ton of time, your time for them. And then marriage. What does our marriages look like then? I say there's room for us to interpret whether this is prescriptive or descriptive. And here's why. I think that the more formative passage we should use to understand what our marriages are is not wives submit to your husbands and husbands love your wives, but rather the two become one flesh. That passage at the end of Genesis chapter 2, it's repeated by Jesus, it's repeated by Paul when he's going through what these are. This is the specific application of this concept, that the two become one. And so within our marriages, we have to decide, what is that going to look like for us to be on the same page, for us to love and serve each other. And whether we say, you know what, the male will always have headship and he will always have the responsibility to lift up the female, or we say in some roles, the male will have the responsibility and others, the female will have the responsibility, we have to decide we will be unified together the way that it was always designed, and the one in leadership will be constantly serving the other and lifting them up. I think we would all agree that a healthy marriage is when both parties have this mindset of lifting the other up. Which means our marriages will look different because we're different people, because we are not trying to be some sort of uniform model of what marriage looks like. Rather, we're two people becoming one. And so with two unique people, we're all unique. That means every marriage will look different. So how we support each other in marriage is not telling you need to do this more, but rather we need to encourage each other to hold on to each other and make sure that we can complement each other, just like Flint and Steel, or two sides of the coin, or a head and a body, and whatever roles work best to hold together. So that's where I land with all of this. But as you can tell, there's plenty more discussion on the practical application, what this looks like in your life, and we haven't even touched church life. So we've got 2 more weeks of this series. We're going to be touching the topic of authority. What does that mean here within the church? Who has authority? And can women have authority? Do they need to have a man that has authority over them? We're going to talk all about how does that work here within the church next week. And then in 3 weeks, we're going to finish up the series and talk specifically about beyond church. What have we decided? In particular, what does our leadership structure even look like? So not just on women in ministry, but also how have we structured ourselves with regard to leadership. In between there, we've got this meal pack event on October 3rd. I just want to encourage you one more time, be inviting people. We committed to doing more meals than what we can do here in this room. We anticipate that we'll bring a family, we'll bring friends, and we'll serve alongside them. And I particularly have in mind people that don't want to go to church, that say, don't invite me to your church, that's no fun. Say, don't worry, we're going to do this meal pack together, but we'd love to have you with us, working side by side to do this thing that's an expression of God's love. We don't have to shy away and tell them that, oh, this isn't a Christian thing. It's like, no, this is very, very much a Christian thing, that we're just living God's love beyond ourselves. Would you come partner with me in doing that in whatever way works for you? But that's going to be in 2 weeks. We'll wrap up the series next week, then the meal pack, and then the week after that, and continue to look at, well, what is this gender? What are these differences? How does it apply to us here in the church? I have some questions for further discussion, and as always, I'm available. I'd love to talk through this further. There are additional passages that we can go to that we didn't have time to this morning, and perhaps you've got thoughts as well, but talk about them in community groups, talk about them with me. We're healthier the more we talk about these tough issues. What is one major difference between men and women? You can be funny with this one. It could be an icebreaker. What do you notice? Number 2, Ephesians 5, are they descriptive or prescriptive? 1 Peter 3 is another place where you see wives should submit to their husbands. Read that one and see if that can inform your decision as well. Where do you have the role of the leader, and where do you have the role of the follower? And lastly, how can you fulfill these roles as a Christian? Find yourself within them, and what does it mean to submit then? What does it mean to love as Christ loved the church? Let's answer those, because that is what Paul is teaching, and that's what it looks like to be a Christian in our world and in our social roles. Would you pray with me this morning and ask that God would just guide us as we reflect on this and we listen to him and his guidance? Dear Lord, we thank you for your word. We admit that there's discussion and confusion about what exactly you mean by these words, but we know that you mean something to us. We know that there is truth, and we want to obey and to follow. I pray, Lord, that you would keep us open to what it is that you have to say, even if it's not what we think or not what we want it to say, but rather our posture would be one of submission to you, God, that we want to know you and we want to follow you. You are our God, and we know that we don't get to decide what it says. Teach us to have humble hearts. Both of the roles, for men and women, or for those that are the head or the body, Lord, require tremendous humility and a desire for the other to be made greater at our expense. May your power, your example of Christ, Lord, be in us so that we can do it, that this is accessible to us. It's unnatural, but we know that with you all things are possible. You are the one who will be able to empower us to serve and love others beyond ourselves, even with this meal pack. I pray that we'd keep that in mind, not as something that we can do for our own glory, but rather something that we can do as a reflection of you. Keep us humble. Keep us humble throughout the week as we approach our enemies. Help us just keep these teachings in mind, and we ask that you would impress upon us the parts that we need from your Spirit. We pray this in your Son's name, Lord. Amen. Would you stand?